Coffee is a big part of my day. Not only does it help me get through the morning, but I just really love the taste of good quality beans. Trade is a subscription service that brings great coffee from indie roasters all over the country right to your door. Tell Trade what you typically like, whether it's espresso or single origins or even decaf, even how you like to make your coffee, and they will recommend the right beans for you. Or you can just choose from over 450 different coffees. Then you select how often you'd like the coffee delivered to you. Shipping is always free, by the way. And if you need to skip a week or so, just do that. You can do it. No charge at all. Then pick back up when you're ready to get beans delivered to your door again. Go to unitedwedrink.com/trade to get started with Trade today and start getting some of the best coffees in the country delivered to your door. That's unitedwedrink.com/trade. The opinions and statements in this podcast do not represent those of the host's employers, coworkers, family, or imaginary friends. Now enjoy the show.
Happy hour? More like amateur hour. Welcome to United We Drink.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another new episode of the United We Drink podcast right here on unitedwedrink.com, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and wherever fine podcasts are found. My name is Mike Urevich. I am here, joined again. I'm not even going to do any silly shtick for this one, but I'm adding that in to talk about how I'm not doing the silly shtick.
It's called hanging a lantern on it. Yeah, you're hanging a lantern on that one, Mike. And for the most part, I also stepped on my introduction, which means it just shows our professionalism across the board. It's always good when you highlight when we're both being lazy.
Oh, yes. I like it to be just like a really bright focus. Like, hey, look at us fucking up. I don't have anywhere to hang my lanterns on. I don't even have any lanterns, Kevin. What is this? Am I not hurricane prepared right now?
You're a lanternless person, Mike. I have several. I can let you borrow them. I do want to point out that we are a brave podcast because many people will wait until they get really, really good to start phoning it in, like really popular, and then they phone it in later on. It's like a pro wrestler, they become a mega star, then they start letting themselves go a little bit. They don't work as hard in their matches because they can coast on their reputation. We decided just hang it up, start just sending it in, mailing it in early on before we get to that part. I think in that way we're ahead of the game.
We're not even into like season 6 or 7 yet, and we're just coasting right now. So we got some stuff to talk about here, but before we get into craft beer for the last week, Kevin, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a Copper Point Lager.
Saw you pouring. I figured I'd wait till. Where did you purchase that?
I purchased this at a Total Wine & More in Boca Raton, Florida. Copper Point Lager will be the Old Favorite Friday this week for Barrel Amongst ongoing beer series. And I picked up a 6-pack for that and was happy enough to take the rest home.
Awesome. I don't know whether to be like because your Old Favorite Friday, I feel like focuses sometimes on like the often forgotten, and I'm like, I really hope we're not an often forgotten.
Well, I mean, one of the premises of it was that the beer that sparked the entire thing was Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, because it's incredible and perfect, and a lot of people don't seem to care as much as they should because it's just mundane and it's regular, it's every day. So and it's not a forgotten beer in a lot of ways because it's all over the place. So I think there is a way to interpret that, and I think sometimes some beers are, but when featuring this beer, it really comes down to it's the first beer, or one of the first beers that Copper Point ever produced. It is a staple, workhorse, absolutely incredible, and is widely available in Florida. Yet no one I know is sitting there going, "Oh my God, did you get to Copper Point yesterday to get the lager?" You're talking about your special releases and things of that nature. And what I want to do is always highlight the classic beers, the excellent beers, the well-made beers that we should be talking about more, whether that's because we don't talk about them at all or because we don't talk about them enough. Either one of those things works. Does that make you feel better?
Tiny bit. But I feel bad because of other things unrelated to just that. So you're not going to cure those ones. Your head brewer Ralph was at our brewery over the weekend, and he sent me a message with a picture, and he was very happy with the stuff that he was having, and it made me very happy that he was enjoying himself. I called in to the tap room and was like, take care of some beers for him. He was also impressed that I was able to identify what he was drinking just from a picture. But I was like, our beers don't really look similar to one another, so it was kind of easy if it's a decent picture to tell what he was having.
No, you're a very talented man, and thank you for taking care of Ralph, obviously. And no, we always sing the praises of Copper Point around Barrel of Monks, and I always say that it's my favorite brewery. And this is before you started working there, Mike. It's my favorite brewery other than my own in South Florida, and maybe even in Florida altogether.
Oh, such wonderful, charming words. I'm drinking a cider tonight. I am having a cider from my friends at Plowman Ciders in PA. This is Dabinet Roxbury Russet. It is a blended barrel-aged cider. It is very delicious. I've had it before a few times. I get it from time to time in my club membership that I have with them. And it is 8.5%. I just realized that. Also have a little bit of bourbon with me, as I tend to for these things. So, since the last episode, some big news in the beer world came down, and that is the announcement of Anchor ceasing operations and going to liquidation. The parent company of Anchor, Sapporo Breweries, who bought the brewery in 2017, made the announcement just last week or 2 weeks ago by the time that you hear this. Kind of blaming sales, stagnant sales, blaming COVID, and all of that. Before we I want to dig a little more into reasons. I'd like to get what your reaction was to this, Kev.
It was mildly shocking that they just came out and said that they were going to cease distribution outside of their home state, I believe.
Yeah, it was a month ago.
Yeah, so I think it was shocking that you would imagine maybe 6 months, a year of that kind of process. You'd think that they had a plan in place that this would make them right and they would be able to do whatever they could do financially to keep going. And for them to announce a month later that they're done, it just shows what kind of bad straits that I assume that they were in. It was really sad. And I think it was a Don't Drink Beers page on Facebook that posted a meme, probably maybe reposted. I'm sure this has been said by multiple people. This is where I saw it for the first time, and it's a good follow if you're not already doing it, which I believe most people that in their industry probably do. It said something about, the fact that all these people basically, it was a picture, it was a meme. I can't repeat exactly what it was. I'm not going to describe what the photo looked like, but the gist was, is that
do your best.
I know this is already this is becoming painful to me, and I'm the one saying it.
So then he says,
the point of the thing was all these people getting upset that Anchor's closing when they haven't bought an Anchor product in 15 years. And big beer is ruining everything, but I haven't picked up an Anchor Steam in forever. And I've talked about it before when we did the Steam beer. We've done the porter on Old Favorite Friday, and how much I love those beers. And I do not pick them up and had not picked them up regularly. Part of it for me was that I did not see them nearly as much in my home state. I did pick up multiple 6-packs of porter when I saw that it popped back up at my local Total Wine. And I went back the other day to see if they had any more left on the shelf, and they didn't, which was sad for me because now it means it's completely gone. But it's an important brewery to me because it's one of the first crafts I got into. I still think and I believe that the beer was extremely high quality. And it's a sad day, and it speaks to the fact that longevity isn't everything. We're in a what have you done for me lately kind of mode in craft beer, and no one's safe.
Yeah, I was pretty bummed to hear about the news. Pretty much echo your sentiments about I wasn't able to purchase the beer as much as others. And a lot of it to me had to do with just being able to find it, like you said. I just last week, talking about this closure with other people, realized that they changed distributors at the beginning of this year down here in South Florida, from a distributor who I won't name, but did them no favors, dropped brands within their portfolio, picked them up, dropped them, and made it a very in a lot of places. So that hindered my ability to really find, like, porter, world-class fucking beer.
It's perfect. It's great beer.
And I feel like I mentioned this earlier in the year when during the NFL playoffs, the Eagles were playing the 49ers. My wife is from the San Francisco area, and I wanted to go get some Anchor Steam to have we were having family over from both sides of the family, and I could not find Anchor Steam. And I was like, what the fuck? But I wanted to talk a little bit. I don't know how much you have read into this and seen the reporting on this, but big shout out to Dave Infante, who runs the Fingers newsletter. It's an independent beer newsletter over on Substack. He has been reporting on Anchor for a while now, and he was the first one to break the news about the pullback in distribution of Christmas Ale, and he spoke with a number of employees at Anchor over the last week or so. First of all of the employees pretty much found out about this news via the media. They were not informed that this closure was going to happen. They found out the same way that all of us found out. Pretty sad.
That's tough. Yeah.
Yeah. There's many longtime employees. Apparently, Anchor has been a place that a lot of people have worked at for a long time. Not a lot of turnover. People have worked there for 15 to 30 years who are there right now. When they were purchased by Sapporo in 2017, apparently the things just did not start off well, and they thought that they could upgrade Anchor's facility to produce Sapporo lagers, and they very quickly realized we can't do that, and they were disappointed that they weren't going to be able to make lager there. And it was kind of like one of those, they should have known that from the start.
How did you not do your homework on that?
Yeah.
If that was your plan, you have a massive brewing company. You can't realize that wouldn't work in that facility?
Apparently so. They became the first brewery to craft brewery to unionize in 2019 because of poor working conditions and pay that stemmed from the purchase. And and then after Sapporo purchased Stone, it seemed like they were completely just shut out from getting funds and support from the parent company. They did this rebranding. They just didn't care. Tried to sell them, or the reports but didn't get a number that they liked. And so now it's all heading to liquidation.
Well, I just read something, I think it was yesterday, on the day we record this, that there is a group or a local business person that is trying to get some funds together to try to go after and purchase this brand still at this point. And apparently they said something, they have like 30 investors on board. And if they had known about this beforehand, they would have made a serious offer. And they have these plans of what they want to do with the brand if they get it. It might be someone famous. It might be someone in the beer scene. It wasn't a name I recognized. But there's a possibility that this isn't the end of Anchor. There is a possibility still at this point until everything's completely closed. I mean, they could sell the IP. They could really close everything down and sell the IP, and someone could contract brew it. Who knows? So there is a possibility it would live on in some way, shape, or form. I think it is another thing that we continue to see, and we saw this with Constellation. And yes, Stone is still, I mean, who knows how profitable it is, but Stone is also owned by Sapporo, as you mentioned, and is still in operation. And at least on the outside looking in, looks like it's doing well. But it's another nail in the coffin of crafts being bought by, macro beers and them not being able to turn the kind of profits that they're looking for. It is another example of the fact that craft business is different than macro big beer business, and it's hard to do both. It's hard to do one. It's really hard to do both well, and to know what the market will bear and what you can sell where and what's considered a local, what's considered a craft in different areas, what kind of market penetration and visibility do you have on a brand that's been around for 100 years. It's a really, really complex market, and every brewer that I know that said, well, the plan is that we're going to get this money together, we're going to start this brewery, and in 5 to 10 years, we're going to sell it off to Budweiser. Man, I really hope people put their money. I hope people are being profitable, and I hope people made a longer big business plan than that, because I got a feeling that we're not going to see a lot of those going forward. And every one of these things that happens just is another nail in that coffin.
Yeah. Not to harp on that too much, but yes. Stone has the ability to make rice lagers for their parent company, so they at least will be able to keep doing that. There is a change.org petition that was created by the president of Narragansett in hopes of trying to save Anchor, but I don't know what that actually means in saving a company. You can't just save them, okay? With what money? But we very well could have someone purchasing their IP in liquidation for dollars on the I almost said dollars on the penny. It would be the other way around. But there's issues with that to me, and the fact that Anchor has been brewing on these copper brew systems for ever. They use open fermentation for practically all of their beers. Not many, like, to say that those things don't lend to the flavor of the beers, I think would be wrong. And to put that into a new owner's lap and be like, okay, now make this iconic brand taste the way that it's supposed to, could be really tough.
And it was obviously a failing brand. It's beloved. People are going to be sad it's gone, and if it shows back up on shelves in 6 months, there will be a lot of goodwill for people saying, "Hey, we need to buy this beer now because they're back." But how long will that last? So yeah, even if they replicate the flavor perfectly, so it goes back on shelves and people continue not to buy the beer. There are life cycles with businesses, and with the amount of competition out there, and with the nature of the craft beer person that tends to jump around and get onto something new all the time, it's who's the market? Who's the market for Anchor at this period? And I think their business operations, there might be some other stuff behind the scenes that we don't know about, but
for sure.
I'm just saying, overall, the market kind of spoke and they weren't selling well. So there's nothing immediately that says, oh my God, it's going to change completely with a different owner.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I think we can leave it at that for now. If anything changes, you will be sure to not hear it from us first, but probably a week later. And then by that time, you're going to be like, I'm sick of hearing stuff about this. Because that's how we roll. So our main thing we wanted to talk about, main topic, is I've been in this industry over 11 years. Kevin, what are you, like 13, 14, somewhere around there?
Almost 15.
Almost 15. During those times, we've said a lot of things. The industry, about styles, about breweries in general, and thinking that we know what we are talking about. Well, we could be goddamn wrong a lot of those times. So we thought we would highlight our faults and talk a little bit about times we've been wrong about stuff that we thought was going to happen within the beer industry. And I will kick things off here with one that I think that a lot of people probably could say, that is the staying power of hazy IPAs. I was not aboard the haze train when it first came out. I didn't understand it. I thought it was a technical flaw. I thought that it was something that, when I heard people talking about mouthfeel and flavors and all of that, I'm like, this could be accomplished with a hell of a lot less hops and no turbidness to it. I mean, I know that is kind of true, but I think that there is something that there is something to really, which I still think are far and few between. There are breweries who know how to make them very well because they've done their homework. They know the science. They're not just throwing 5 pounds per barrel of hops into their FVs and being like, and using a British ale yeast and saying, okay, done. No, there's more to it than that. And I have learned to accept that and also appreciate that. I like a really well-crafted hazy IPA now. And I was not on board that on the early stages of it. So I can very much admit that this was not a trend. It is something that has the staying power and is pretty much here to stay.
So I have to, first of all, I need to jump on top of that immediately because I had something about the hazy IPA as far as something that I was wrong about. And it was similar to you, but it was that I didn't like them. And I did not think that they were, in the way you said that, I think they were flawed beers. It was, as you, I'm basically just repeating what you're saying now because now you stole one of my things. But
please do it. I just want reaffirmation.
Yeah, exactly. But it was really tasting good ones that made me understand that this is a good beer style that I could really enjoy. Because when I was just picking plant particulate out of my teeth, I was saying there's no way in hell this could stick around for any length of time, and there's no skill involved in this. It's just our typical Americanized beer. And if a little bit of something's good, triple it will be better. And that's the way it's worked with pastry stouts and smoothie sours and hazy IPA. It's just, that's what we do. And usually most of the examples of this kind of suck, even if they're extremely popular breweries and a few people do it really, really well. And it was Ralph from Barrel of Monks, my head brewer, that taught me the skill that it takes to make a good hazy IPA and kind of gave me the examples of good ones to try. So I'm right there with you. I missed that completely. Talking about trends and things in the industry that we completely screwed up. How about the entire basis of my current career? Belgians will come back at some point, right? I thought they would. At some point, we'd get back on multi-classic Belgian styles. because craft beer, in a lot of ways, the craft beer movement in this country started with Belgians. They were some of Chimay and different Trappist ales were some of the first beers that were available commercially throughout the country. And many people started their beer journey with Belgian beer. And that, we just go back to Westy 12, right? It was the number one beer in the world on Beer Advocate for years and years and years. And we just assume that with the cyclical cycle of the beer buying populace, we hit on nothing but bitter IPAs, West Coast IPAs, then imperial stouts, then we got into this thing, that thing, or the other. I just assumed at some point people were going to give a shit about Belgians again. And I have been proven wrong, at least at this point of our 9-year run at Barrel of Monks. It's not that we don't sell our beer. We absolutely do. Our tasting room is busy, and there are people that like these styles. But there's a reason why we're doing something else with IPAs and London Porters and lagers, and we're doing our first Marzen. Is because that the masses have not come back around to that. And I'm now willing to admit, I don't think they ever will. I think it is a curiosity. I think there's a flavor profile, a uniqueness to Belgian beer that I don't know if will ever become popularized again in the States.
I feel you on that because I think, unfortunately, that this can kind of go into talking about just European beers in general. I would love to see another rise of English beers, like German and Czech beers are seeing a renaissance to a certain extent, but it's so small. It's still on that niche scale. I feel like with Belgian beers, maybe a tiny bit higher. I don't know, because lagers are hip, but I mean they aren't the big hitters like IPAs. And I don't think that they will. And I feel like, unfortunately, I might be stepping on your toes with another one of your things here, talking about the rise of lager. And like it seems like every year people are saying this is the year that lagers start taking over the craft beer market again, and that's just never really happened. Yes, it's come up each year, and we have more lager-focused breweries, but I don't know if we're ever going to get to the point of being like lager is bigger than IPA.
Have you been reading my notes, Mike? Is that what's happening right now?
We did have a phone call yesterday where I was very distracted, but I did keep that in my head.
You logged into my phone. I literally have one. Craft lagers will be a thing, because we've been talking about that forever. And this is also talking about the dichotomy of the beer market. Many people, or any people that are listening to this that are real beer nerds, or they're traders, or they're really into it, and they're in smaller breweries, they're probably saying, yeah, my Italian style Pilsner flies off the shelves. People absolutely love it. But if you look at what's happened over the last 5 years and I'm talking, there are probably examples of this nationally that have worked. So please, let us know. Tell us when we're wrong here. We're admitting we're wrong in things, so I'm happy to hear it again. I hear it most of my life.
Just this night. We will never admit again.
But look at in our state, Cigar City Lager didn't take off. Vibin from Funky Buddha didn't take off. These are the two biggest breweries in our state that could not make a lager work as far as long-term and compete with, I don't know who they're trying to compete with. They're trying to compete with Budweiser. They're trying to compete with Stella. I mean, whatever national lager brands could not make it work, because
that was Cigar City's second attempt at lager. They had Hotter Than Helles before that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So it's not the crossover beer. It's too esoteric and maybe too expensive for typical macro lager drinkers. It's too, quote unquote, boring for craft drinkers. They'll say it's great. They'll go, and if it's hot, and if people are talking about it online, and if they can get some beers from the a 6-pack of 16-ounce cans and trade someone for it, they're going to lose their minds over it and talk about how great it is. But they're not going to buy it regularly, and they're not going to buy it when they see it on the store shelves. And I was right there with you. I thought this was going to be a new wave of things. We started Barrel Amongst. I was like, I need to have something like that. We went with a single ale, trying to wedge into that market, which was a total disaster. And we've talked about lager consistently since. And I have now had to back off of that and go, dude, we gotta stay off that. That's not going to be our lane.
Yeah, I think that we've talked about this on previous episodes, is that we tried to cater to the macro drinker and be like, you need to come here and have this because it's better. And that is just a subjective thing, that's saying better. But the price point thing was the biggest thing. We never, ever could get close to a price point that made people more than curious. And that's really just where it stays. I think it's just going to be a niche thing that the really good makers will make it, and they will cater to those who appreciate really well-crafted lagers. And to some of the, no offense to our boy Craig, who likes to call them Crispies, that's a cringe inducing term to me. But I mean, some of those folks do enjoy doing that, or having those beers. But yeah, I don't think that it will ever get past kind of. I mean, it'll increase like 0.5%, and I'm wrong, but it's not going to be a big thing.
Well, moving on to one of my next items of something that I got wrong. You did kind of mention it a little bit there in your last rant about the lagers, and I was convinced, and I've been convinced with this most of my life, because I started in the food industry and working in chain restaurants. I had my grandfather's banquet hall, but then moving into more like fine dining restaurants and really trying great ingredients and trying real San Marzano tomatoes for the first time, and Parmigiano Reggiano, and learning about food and the difference between, specifically, I worked in an Italian restaurant, like, Olive Garden Italian when I was 19, 20, and I'm not from a wealthy background. To me, growing up, Olive Garden was like the fancy place you went. I mean, kids in my high school went there for prom. I saw people get married at the Olive Garden growing up. That was, where I was. So when I first learned about good Italian food, it was revolutionary to me. And then I learned about wine and the difference between good wine and bad wine. But basically, long story short, I came to believe that if you just had people try the better version of something, the more evolved version of something, the more complex version, you would hook them immediately. They would become converts to that particular brand. And with beer, I was convinced it was even easier, because even though craft is more expensive, it is not the jump from a cheap craft beer or a cheap beer to a good craft beer is much smaller across the board generally than the jump from a super cheap wine to a really, really good bottle of wine, or the jump from a really cheap restaurant to a really, really nice restaurant. And I was just convinced that if we just got the beer in front of people, if we just let them try it, we would convert everybody, and the craft beer market would explode, and we would push out so much of the lower quality beers that are both A, with the macro beers, and B, with the shitty craft beers that are all over the place as well. And man, was I wrong. The converts are not coming hand over fist. I've had conversations with major suppliers or major retailers in the state of Florida, and the craft section hasn't grown at all in the last 5 to 10 years. It just hasn't. So I thought that we could convert people more easily, and I was totally off the mark with that.
The affordable luxury is what Sam Calgione called it.
It's a great line, and it's in a lot of ways it is true.
It is absolutely true. But I unfortunately think that there is a stigma on beer in general. Or maybe stigma is a harsh word, but there's just a generalized thought that beer is a working man's drink. It's supposed to be cheap. It's supposed to be affordable, and that beer isn't supposed to be expensive, no matter what it is. And I think that is a tough sell to a lot of people. When we talked about, I think it was the death of craft beer episode, or who are we selling to? I don't remember. They were kind of the same. I think that we have people as we are going to convert. Barring a person who has been in a bunker for the last 20 years and is like, what? There's more than the lukewarm beer that I've been drinking for the last X amount of years. But yeah, you're not going to hook people on that now. Like, wine drinkers are going to be wine drinkers. They might dabble in other stuff here and there. But telling them, hey, I got a really nice bottle of quad and it's only $20 for a 750 or something like that is compared, and this is world class in comparison to your $1,000 bottle of wine. They're not gonna care about that.
They look at you like you're insane if you say that to them, and I have. We built our tap room to resemble a wine bar. We thought we were in Boca Raton with a lot of disposable income, and our quality of beer, a lot of corking cage, a lot barrel aged, can age 3 to 7 years standing on its head, pairs well with food, and we could talk the talk, and the response is basically meh. And I don't see that changing in the future.
Yeah.
What else you got, Mike?
I have, and this is where I get a little negative, in the fact that I thought something was going to happen that was very negative, and it didn't. I thought a bunch of super small dumb breweries would die, but strangely enough, they and I check my wording on this. I am not saying that all super small breweries are dumb. I'm talking about like 10 barrels, 7 barrels and lower, like their system size. And it's breweries that are more middling who are feeling the stress, and bigger ones too. Like these smaller ones, they have low overhead. They probably have cheaper rent because they don't have as much square footage as us. Their brew systems didn't much. So it's they're skating by a little bit easier. We'll see when their leases come up, because that is a thing that is, I think, at least that I've seen a few times, is a determining factor right now, is people hitting their 5 or 10 year lease and being like, you know what? Yeah, now it's not worth it. We were able to do it for that while, but now they want to increase the rent X amount. We're not going to be able to hit that. Now we'll close. But man, a lot of really bad breweries who are super small have been able to just skate on by, relatively, at least from the perspective, unscathed through this.
Yeah, I also think that there's been a lot of breweries that I think objectively, people like myself, me and you, Mike, and other people that we talk to, Joel, other of our friends in the business, collectively don't think make good beer at all. Yet they're extremely popular and they do just well. They continue to crank out kind of one-dimensional brands of beer and do very well with it. And I would have thought that eventually that would either A, people would come wise to the fact of the quality of the actual beer, and B, that people would just move on to something else. And I think some of the latter has happened with some breweries, but I am really shocked at some of the breweries' staying power in kind of that middling area that you're talking about, but also with maybe higher production, but making really esoteric, just craft beer geeky styles. And I'm a little shocked by the staying power of that, and I certainly didn't predict that. And not on this show or anything, but personally have said there's no way that I've mentioned specific breweries, which I won't do because there's no reason to insult people. directly here. I've mentioned to friends, there's no way they're going to be around in 5 years, and there they are. It's surprising, and I was wrong.
I will concur with that point of there is one particular brewery, without naming names, who is wildly popular, makes a lot of hypey beers, makes some blah styles to put out into market, and I have seen the same 4-pack of one of their beers at my Whole Foods for months and months and months, and it's like, if no one's buying this, and it's not even an IPA, it's not even a lager, it's a style that no one cares about, and it's still sitting there, and I'm like, this place is still open and apparently doing well. So it's like, all right.
Yeah, and listen, one of the things that we can always be wrong about, and we'll be wrong either now or in the future, is like the quality of our own stuff or our own perception of the market. So we're trying to be open eyes with that. We have preferences. We have the style of beers that we like, and we do have some professional expertise. I do think we've earned that, at least, to be able to say whatever our opinion is. By the way, everyone has the right to have their opinion about these breweries and the styles that they like. But
except on Untapped.
Except on Untapped, yeah, you have to qualify for that. We've talked about that before. But there's someone out there right now, potentially, if they even care about us or have ever heard of us, probably thinking the same thing. Maybe that I can't believe that Barrel of Monks has stayed open with their low quality of beer. I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure that's understood. If I'm going to throw a stone at somebody, I'm willing to have one thrown back at me, and I'm not going to fight too much about it because that's their personal opinion. We've talked a lot about seltzers in the last several years. I declared seltzer dead about a year ago, to which our good friend Phil Palmisano protested extremely well, saying that that's absolutely not the case. And then he kind of came on here recently and said, the seltzers are kind of dead. So at least the craft side of things, they've really, really slowed down. But one thing I was completely wrong on, when they first kicked off, I did not think they would have any staying power. I thought it was Mike's Hard Lemonade. I thought it was Zima. I thought it was Bartles and James wine coolers. I thought it was Smirnoff Ice. Not that some of those things are not still around, but if you would have told me that seltzer would still have as much exposure with as many brands in grocery stores 3-4 years later of when they were first became popular, I would have told you were crazy. I did not see that whatsoever, and I would have bet my reputation on the fact that that's not the case, and boy, was I wrong. It has not turned out to be a craft market. In that way, maybe I'll take a partial credit, but as far as the long-term power of a clear beverage with alcohol, flavors everyone can understand, simple flavors that people can feel like they're drinking something healthy, even though we all know they're not. It's got staying power. And, 10, 15 years down the road, you're still going to have Truly and White Claw, and you'll still have new companies coming up. I think we have come to a point where it's a segment of the market that will continue and will be able to produce, income beyond one brand.
First, I got to say, I feel like you bringing up Bartles and James is like kind of becoming a low key thing for you. It's an honor and a privilege to a smaller point. Just keep that up. I always smile.
It'll be a little drinking game for people.
Yeah. But yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, White Claw still seems to be doing well, and they've shifted. They're into the RTD stuff, but I mean, I go to my own local grocer, big grocer, and there's still a lot of seltzers in there. There's some of them that are mixed in with the RTD, but there's still a lot of seltzer in there. I remember year and a half, 2 years ago, the craft section was fucking getting smaller. The seltzer section grew a little bit. And now it seems craft has gotten some space back, but Seltzer's still at least a door and a half, maybe 2 doors in my local. It never got more than 2 doors, at least from my knowledge. But yeah, I kind of thought the same thing as you. I thought that this might just be a trend. They'll like people like the not your father's root beer. That thing was hot for a fucking minute. But this showed it had a little more staying power than what we all thought. It didn't get as high into the atmosphere as others probably thought, but I think it's going to be around for in some way, shape, or form.
Sure.
I only really have one other thing here, Kevin, and Kevin, when we do these list things, usually has like 27 things, and I have like 4. So, do you have a bunch of other things that you want to go over before I like just drop my last one?
No, go. Not every one of the things. First of all, it's Mike. It's because I'm wrong more often. Let's just be honest with this, which I'm totally comfortable with. I'm wrong 5 times before I get out of the bed in the morning. I do have several things that don't have to be gone over. So go ahead, and then we'll see how many of mine we get through going forward.
I saved pretty much, I think, my best for last, and that's just the idea that craft is better. I completely openly admit that I drank the Kool-Aid to the craft beer movement. I was all for like the Stone way of like poking the bear and calling it yellow fizzy water or piss or whatever, like when talking about macro. I looked at this totally from a romanticized view, thinking that we're making something artisanal and small and it's better than you. I was fucking wrong in a lot of ways. Like, I don't like using the word craft a whole lot myself anymore. When people ask me what I do, I say I work in the beer industry. I don't say craft. I work at a brewery. I don't say craft. Because it's kind of soured me in a lot of ways. Because the quality is not always better for craft than macro. The way that companies treat their employees is not always better in craft than macro.
There's plenty that macro does that's terrible,
especially with their sales techniques and strong arming distributors and retailers. But that's neither here nor there when it comes to providing livable wages and working conditions for their employees, for making something that is actually fucking drinkable. I was sold a bill of goods. I'm a little perturbed at the results of it after a little while. And I just think that it is fucking bullshit. And I was very, very wrong thinking that craft beer automatically means I'm better than you. And I was very wrong about that.
I think we all went through that period at least where we were trying to stick it to the man, and we were small, we were independent, so it must be better, which is, as you said, it's just not, it's objectively not true. You can't just say it's craft that it's better. You have to have these 100 other things that line up to make you a good brand. And as you eloquently point out, making macro beers, large scale amounts of beer, is not easy. And it takes skill and technique to replicate recipes. And there's great beers out there that are made on massive levels. Kind of piggybacking off something you just said about the industry, we're all in this together. How many times did I feel that way earlier? We're all in this together. We're all going to take down big beer. We're all working together. There's nothing more ridiculous than that notion. I do a beer series where I talk about other breweries, and my partners, one of my partners particularly, always says, why are you always talking about other people's beer? Like, you should be talking about our beer on our social media. And listen, we talk about our beer plenty. I like talking about other people's beer. I like highlighting other people that do really things that I really, really respect. I like talking about Copper Point, even though you are a direct competitor to Barrel of Monks. There is no other way of slicing that. I might not have an amber lager or a lager at all, but we compete for draft lines. And there are absolutely times where we go into a bar where your draft line might be the only one that we have a chance to go after. And Barrel of Monks would go after a Copper Point handle, and Copper Point would go after a Barrel of Monks handle. I have no bones about that. And it's been that way since the beginning. And the idea that it was ever like, oh, we're all friends and, no matter what, we're in this together is just ridiculous. We can support each other. We can like each other. We can have preference for certain breweries, and we can say nice things about each other. I can't have every draft handle. And there was a time recently where I was talking with a new account, and they were talking about their 6 handles, and they gave me 2, and they said, who else should we have? And I said, well, you got to have Copper Point for sure. You got to have a CCB beer because they're the OGs, and I can't remember the other 2 beers that I recommended. But there are those instances, and those are beautiful, but they are not the norm. The norm, even in the beginning, was doing what you can to survive and sell your beer.
Chin chin to that.
Okay, so a few other things I have, since Mike, you didn't have anything to add to that. I, at one point in my life, with the whole craft thing and really wanting everything to be so complex and interesting, light beers are boring. I, at one point, thought light beers were boring. Lighter beers are boring, by the way. Lagers are boring. Amber ales are boring. Everything has to have 15,000 ingredients, and everything has to be at least 8% alcohol. And now, a lot of the beers that I make that I know are good beers, you mentioned a quadruple earlier. I've had a bottle of quad in my fridge, like ready to drink, for weeks and weeks and weeks now. I like that quad. I love that quad. But I have not found the time where I really want to drink it right now. I have already drank 2 of the Copper Point lagers that I brought home 3 days ago. I've already drank through all of the Mountain Time lager that I bought in this time period that 750 has been sitting in my fridge. I've drank through tons of lagers and quote unquote simpler beers and enjoyed them just as much, if not more. Not because the quad wasn't good, but because those other styles are just as good and in some ways a lot better. And I was certainly biased to that earlier on and at different points in my career. Anything in there, Mike?
Yes. I mean, I just agree so much. I'm not out there just like buying cases of Bud Light, but I've learned to let go of some of those just harsh criticisms of something solely based off of who it is that makes it. Like I learned to like some of these beers a lot more. Like I will absolutely drink a PBR. I will absolutely kill a bunch of High Life. Like I like some of these. Like, fucking Modelo. Give me Modelo all day long. I love Modelo. It's to think back at the person who got into the beer industry 11 years ago. He'd fucking smack me for saying something like that. And I don't fucking care at this point.
And you'd smack him right back, Mike.
with something. Because I got so many toys at arm's reach now because of the kids. I got weapons all over the place. But yeah, like I'm not going to try to paraphrase the quote too much, but fucking Bourdain's take on beer and Beer Geeks resonates with me more and more as I get older, and just like I can appreciate really good beer, and I do like having really good beer, but sometimes there's just a point where I just want a cold, nice beer in front of me, and that is like the best beer in the world to me at that point in time.
Amen, brother. One last one. I have a couple more, but we gotta, I'm not. This is becoming the Kevin Abbott show, and no one wants that.
I'm working on a jingle for it.
One of my last ones here is there was a time in my career, because of where I started in the brewing industry, where I really thought that anything could be beer, right? You could basically, if you could carbonate it, and it came at some point, if you waved some barley over a brew kettle, just waved it over, didn't have to put it in the lauter tun, right? You just says, well, there's some barley in the general vicinity, and you carbonated, and it was alcohol, and you put it in a glass, and someone agreed it was beer. It was beer. And this came out of the culinary movement and the maple bacon coffee porter and all that stuff I was involved in. And I was just wrong. And I'm sorry. I now, and this might be my age showing or what have you, and I admit that too, but there are just fundamental things about a lot of the beers that are happening, that are being made at this point, where they are so far removed from anything that tastes like a beer that at some point there is a line that I think when you have these conversations, you have to go, well, is there any line for the people that love the smoothie sours? Is there any line where a beverage can cross where it isn't a beer anymore? And you can and I've said it before, if it's a solid, if you make a cake out of it, is it still a beer? Well, I think all of us agree that probably wouldn't be a beer anymore. So if you agree that there is a line, maybe my line is just a little bit closer to the center or to the origin of beer than yours, and that's fine. And your line is a little bit farther, I mean, I will give you my opinion, but I'm not going to tell you you're an asshole. But I, at this point, try beers on a regular basis and say, this is unfermented wort that just tastes like the ingredients you put in it. There is no balance. There is no nothing. Yes, it tastes like flan, but I can just eat flan. Like, I don't understand what the obsession is with making it not just have those flavors and have them be authentic, but the balance is completely gone, and it's just about an overabundance of something. And early on, I would have led that movement when I was in my late 20s and early 30s, because I was really excited about doing those things. And now in my early 40s, and with my experience, it drives me crazy and kind of breaks my heart a little bit that's what we're talking about when we have so many great beers out there.
First, I gotta say, when you said if I could carbonate it, it's beer. The thing that popped in my mind, because when you were at Funky Buddha, you guys made a lot of culinary type of beers.
Oh, everything.
For whatever reason, the very first object that came to my mind was a piece of red velvet cake being carbonated. I was just like, I know that they've made red velvet, but it's just like, how do I carbonate cake? It's just like thinking about that for way too long.
Mike, I just had to step on you real quick, and I'll get right back to you. But you have these like jokes they make about these like micro gastronomy, or what's it called? Something like, there's restaurants where they like serve you like foam that has the essence of orange, and this is the aroma of beef, and that's the main course or whatever. I don't know how much of that actually happens, but there's like jokes about it in popular culture and this, that, and the other. I really wonder if at some point a brewery is just going to release a cheesecake. It's going to be a chocolate ganache cheesecake, and they're going to say, "Here's our new beer," and are people going to go, "Yeah,
13.5%"?
Yeah, that's a beer now. I'm sorry, go ahead.
But I'm being very careful about how I say this, because you have questioned my taste and stuff recently for being like, but is that beer? I get it to a certain extent. I do find it very funny that the way beer decided we must be taken seriously, like, the Job's magicians, is we will make beer not taste like beer. You will take us seriously.
Mm-hmm.
It's just now dawning on me, and I fucking love it.
Wait a minute. You don't like beer? Yeah. You don't like beer? Are you telling me you don't like beer? Well, why don't you taste this thing that tastes nothing like beer? Do you like beer now? Well, you just gave me a strawberry daiquiri. No, that's what beer is now. Well, if you just change the definition of what a thing is, like I don't like, Mike, you don't like mushrooms. If I just make a nice tomato sauce with a bucatini pasta and say like this is there's mushrooms in here, you'd be like, yeah, these are good mushrooms. I mean, you can't just change the name of a thing and then say that you like the thing.
It's so
and by the
funny.
way,
It's going back to what I talked about is we were saying like we are better than the big boys. We can make better beer than them. And we're like, and how do we do that? By putting fucking cake batter in a fucking beer. Like, I know that you didn't do that. I'd like to think that you didn't do that.
I did.
And
I would have.
But it just it's so funny to think about that now. Is that like this is how we propose people get into beer, like by making it taste like not beer.
All right, two things. One, it's molecular gastronomy that I was failing to come up with earlier. So I'm not a complete moron. I didn't even Google that. I will tell you where the line was first drawn for me. Because for me, making these beers with these crazy ingredients was all about just use more, right? 5 pounds per 5 pounds of raspberries per 5 gallons of beer. The beer tastes like goddamn raspberries. So just do that. Not magic, not special, just use a lot and people say you're a genius. I would do, we would do crazy things with sweet potatoes and all these other things, right? The line for me when I knew that I had gone too far and I would have to let the rest of that part of the industry go on its own path, that I could no longer accompany it, powdered Gatorade. When I heard that someone used powdered Gatorade in a beer, I was like, well, okay, no, like that's not a thing. That's not even a real ingredient. That's like using Kool-Aid. Like, what are we talking about? And then around the same time, I heard the first time of dropping marshmallows into, like, that's just sugar. You're just putting sugar in it. That's not a thing. That's where it really got to me, and I realized that the industry had passed me on in that way, shape, or form.
Yeah. The marshmallow thing is so funny to me because, yes, marshmallows have a distinct flavor, but without the baking aspect of it that you can't really translate through to a fermented thing without using extract. And I have talked to a number of brewers, and the consensus pretty much is extract either all the way or extract to touch it up. We'll put real marshmallows in just to say that we did, although it's not going to do much, and then we'll touch it up with some extract.
Or Tahitian vanilla beans.
I know that was always your big thing, yeah. And yeah. I have utilized that myself.
And by the way, that is one of the things I loved about that aspect of the industry, was finding ways to get flavor profiles into something that was shelf stable, that made the beer not look like complete crap. Not that I didn't make beers that looked like crap. We put pounds and pounds of peanuts and oils into beer that made sure that you could never have any head retention and the beer was not shelf stable. But the complexity and the challenge of saying, well, I want to get this flavor into a beer. Well, you might need to not use that ingredient. You might need to use 2 other ingredients, or find something that you would never think of that actually works. But yeah, I've switched a lot on that position. I was completely wrong, and I'm sorry for my part in pushing those ideas along. I feel like we would be a little bit farther along as an industry if we were a little more grown up and made some beers that are a little more like beer.
You're here. Anything else you want to add in there, or?
That's there's one other thing, but I'll keep that in my pocket for the next episode that we talk about all the things we get wrong. We could probably do one in like 3 weeks, because I will admit that some of these opinions I have on smoothie sours and pastry stouts, and even some of the breweries that I'm mentioning right now that I haven't mentioned out loud, but they're in my brain, and Mike probably knows who I'm talking about as well. I reserve the right to be wrong about that. I talked to someone I mean, it seems like recently, but it was over a year ago when I was talking to someone and said, teach me what makes a good smoothie sour. Teach me what makes a really good pastry stout other than just being overly sweet and having way, way too much of each one of the ingredients. If I try these two things side by side, teach me why this one's good and this one's not. And I reserve the right to be completely wrong, switch on a dime, and find joy and enjoyment in those styles, just like Mike, you talked about hazy IPAs. If you can explain to me and give me a rundown of why one is better than the other, because so far I've tried ones that are sought after cult beers, and I've tried ones that were made on someone's back porch, and I can't tell the difference. So if someone can give me the tool, like I said, I'll flip on a dime. I'll come up on here in a year or so and say, man, I was completely wrong about that. I think that's what we're all trying to do, right? We're trying to learn and grow and always be willing to say when we're wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's head into last calls, point in the show where we give each other an unspecific amount of time to talk about whatever it is that is racking around in our brains, beer related, not beer related. All of these opinions are uninterrupted, unopposed, unobjected. I'm going to start things off here. And I know that Kevin's going to really love this because I'm going to talk about something that we've talked about on this show before. And it's not related to beer, and it's related to The Good Place, Kevin's favorite television show. I just recently finished up a rewatch of it. It's such a beautiful show. I did a last call about this, I think like 2 or 3 episodes ago. But I was recently told about the podcast that accompanied the show that is hosted by Mark Evan Jackson, who plays Sean on the show. And they have writers and actors and set designers and musical people, like so many people. Mike Schur, the creator, is on the show. And just when we finished the rewatch, I was sad. Not because like it's a little bit of a sad ending, but I was sad that I don't get to see these characters that I love so much anymore. And hearing that there's a podcast all about the show, starting from the very beginning of the show, I'm like, all right, this is all I listen to from here on out till the end of this series of podcasts. And that's what I've been doing. Every other podcast that I listen to has taken a back seat. And it is just such a joy to hear about how the show was created, the writing process, going back to how the show was created, how they kept almost everyone in the dark about the big twist on the first season. And only the writers and the creator and a couple executives knew what was, and the 2 biggest stars knew what was going on. And that it never leaked out. And it's such a fun enjoyment to hear about how one of your favorite shows is made, and to get a little bit of a sneak into an industry that you enjoy but don't work in and don't really have a huge urge to work in. But hearing about how the curtains pulled back and how some of this stuff works is really fun and enjoyable to me too. If you like The Good Place, oh, by the way, I have to credit a friend of the show, Jay, for recommending this to me. Kevin never told me about this, a person who knew about the podcast, and this is his favorite show of all time. But thank you, Jay, for recommending this to me. It is my new obsession, and it continues on with my my love and care for the characters and the people who made The Good Place to such a good place in my life. So, thanks. Kevin.
My last call is all an apology to Mike for not telling him about the podcast. I'm sorry forever and ever and ever. The show is amazing. The podcast is amazing. It's just joy. It's just love for each other, which is wonderful. So I'm going to stick in the world of popular culture and talk about our friend Joel, who told me that the new Into the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse was maybe the best movie that he'd ever seen. had to be seen in theaters, and I don't take that lightly. But I had not seen Into the Spider-Verse. I had not seen the original animated movie, which I believe came out around 2020, 2018. I don't know. It was quite a while ago, but just never watched it for whatever reason. I love Marvel stuff. I love superhero stuff, but it just, whatever. It just never, I saw it and I love animation, but just for whatever reason, I had not heard a lot about it. So it just did not come up on my radar as something that I wanted to watch. Because Joel's recommendation, I had to, if I'm going to watch the next one, I have to watch the original. Allie and I, my wife, watched it last weekend. It was mind-blowing. It was so good. It was so heartfelt. It was so well thought. I have spent the last week just watching Screen Crush and Heavy Spoilers breakdowns of this plug, by the way. Great YouTube channels to watch. They have millions of subscribers. We have like 7. So there's none of you statistically that don't know of this. But anyway, if you haven't, Screen Crush and Heavy Spoilers, just watching breakdowns of this movie and reading the IMDb pages talking about just trivia about it and the detail of the frame rate change of Miles early on because he's not comfortable in his spider ability yet, but then it changes to the right frame rate later on, and all the Easter eggs and the care and the casting and everything that went into this movie is mind-blowing. It is beautiful. It is revolutionary as far as just the way you're going to see animation and you're going to see a superhero story told through a cinematic experience was mind-blowing. And if the next movie is even better, which is what Joel's saying, I don't know that I am prepared to watch it and have my world changed because that movie was so good. I came out of that thinking maybe every MCU movie, and I know this isn't directly tied to the MCU, it's Sony's own thing, but I'm talking about superhero movies. Maybe every MCU movie needs to be animated. Maybe that's just the trick, because watching Miles Morales and the host of spider people go through their trials, I was invested and I cared deeply. And when I watched the animation swirling in a cacophony of chaos around them, I was still dialed into the character and cared about them just as much for their survival and the next step of the journey. When I watched Paul Rudd surrounded by a cacophony of chaos of CGI, all I was thinking was, man, that's a lot of CGI. When you tell these stories that are in and of themselves comic, where practical sets are impractical, and you have to represent, the multiverse of madness and things of that nature, maybe we need to go to animation to make this special and use incredible voice actors like we had in this to represent these scenes in a completely different way, disengage our brains and really see this with new eyes. And that's what this movie did for me. And I thank Joel for recommending it. And I cannot wait to watch the next iteration of this because it was beautiful.
Awesome. Kevin, you want to plug anything?
Do I want to plug anything? You have to, at this point when this show comes out, you have to go onto our YouTube channel and see myself and Ralph talking about Copper Point Lager. We will fawn over it like fanboys. We will give a shout out to Mike Urabich for sure and say how much we love that beer. But it just in general, go to our YouTube channel, Barrel of Monks, and see the conversations we're having about really, really great beers. And if you're listening to this, probably beers you're going to love. And I'm sure maybe you would disagree with me most of the time, partially, who knows. But leave a comment. Tell us what beers we should be doing for Old Favorite Friday, because we really want to talk about my favorite beers, Ralph's favorite beers. I ask Mike all the time. We want to know about your favorite beers and give them the respect they deserve.
You're here. If you want to follow me, I'm at Mike Loves Beer on Twitter, Instagram, Threads. I also have my my Substack that I'm doing my weekly newsletter free, mikelovesbeer.substack.com. You can subscribe and it comes right to your inbox. Other than that, you can follow our show at United We Drink on Twitter, at United We Drink Pod on Instagram and Threads. We're on all of the podcast streaming services, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, all of that good stuff. If you want to support the show financially via buying some merch, we got that over on our store, unitedwedrink.com/store. We also have some awesome brands that we love on unitedwedrink.com as well, such as like Liquid Death, Made in Cookware, Trade Coffee, awesome stuff over there. You purchase anything from those links and it goes back and supports the show. Other than that, we'll be back in a couple weeks, I believe, with a guest. If not, then we don't have a guest. But we'll be back in a couple weeks with a show. And
I love you leaving all the possibilities open.
From listening to all of those the writers talking about how they wrote cliffhangers for The Good Place. That's how I write a cliffhanger.
We either will have a guest or we will not. I mean, we have listen, you have limitless possibilities.
Other than that, thanks everyone for joining us. We'll catch you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.
And I knew nothing about Belgium back then, so I took the bus and it changed my life. One weekend in Belgium changed my life.
One weekend in Belgium changed my life.